Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion's Lunch and Learn. March is Women's History Month, where we celebrate the contributions that women have made in American history. Women are essential and powerful in every trade, job function, and career segment and make the world thrive. I would like to thank the Board of Commissioners and County Administration's continuous support and celebration of women's contributions to our community. To quote our County Administrator, Kenneth Wilson, I have the greatest admiration for women because they lead in every aspect of our personal and professional lives and have overcome the greatest challenges in the ongoing pursuit to eliminate discrimination and achieve equity. The world could not exist without women in it. Such a powerful, amazing message. Today, we are taking the time to honor and highlight the amazing contributions of women in the fields of technology and in the arts. I have the pleasure of introducing Lisa Chambers, National Executive Director of Tech Corp, and Demetrius Neely, Executive Director of the King Arts Complex. Lisa Chambers has more than 20 years experience building cross-sector strategic alliances and developing nationally recognized and award-winning computer science and information technology programs for kindergarten through 12th grade students and teachers. Ms. Chambers joined Tech Corp as the State Director of the Ohio chapter in 1999 and was named the Tech Corp's National Executive Director in 2011. Demetrius Neely owned her own law firm for 4 years prior to joining the King Arts Complex, and before entering private law practice, she built a 22-year career at Nationwide Insurance, where she was an executive for 11 years. Ms. Neely is very active in her community and believes in paying back as well as paying forward. Thank you both so much for joining us today. To lead right into the discussion, as we are so excited for this, could you please tell us more about your organizations and what types of programs you offer?
Sure. So, my passion and purpose has always been to provide access and opportunity to folks that have been marginalized. And today, that work happens through the lens of technology. So I work for, really a privilege and a pleasure to work for an organization called TechCore. So we're a national nonprofit organization headquartered in Columbus, Ohio. And at our core, we just believe that all kids should have access to high quality technology learning experiences. But what we know in this country is that right now, access is often determined by a student's race, their gender, their zip code, and their family's economic situation. And so TechCore does two things. We develop computer science and technology programs for students in 3rd through 12th grade. And so those programs look like after school programs, summer camps, and then with some of the work that we're doing with Franklin County, deep immersion programs, summer learn and earn programs, where students have an opportunity to earn an industry recognized credential or college credit for their work in the program. So that's kind of the first thing that TechCore does. The second thing we do is we recruit, train, and deploy talent to implement our programs. And so when we think about talent, there are 3 groups that we do work with. So first would be industry volunteers. So here in Franklin County, folks from companies like Nationwide or American Electric Power, JP Morgan Chase, Willow Tree, their technology professionals volunteer their time with TechCore. We give them curriculum and support to go out in the community and do skill-based volunteering with our students. The second group, when we think about talent, would be computer science and engineering undergrads who sign up to join the Corps and who are trained to implement TechCore programs in communities where they live or where they attend school. And then the final group would be classroom teachers who we can provide curriculum and professional development to so that they can bring computer science into their classrooms in a way that is rigorous, fun, and also connected to learning outcomes. So we don't think that every kid that goes through a TechCore program will grow up to become a software developer, but what we want to make sure is happening is that kids have this exposure and have the opportunity so that they're making informed decisions about what they want to do in the long term. So long answer, but Leandra, is really excited to be here and super excited to talk to you more about TechCorps. So thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Ms. Neely.
So the King Arts Complex, we could repeat some of the same things Lisa said earlier, because we are all about access and being a resource for the community. The King Arts Complex is the longest continuously running Black cultural and arts organization in Central Ohio. And we actually turned 36 today, literally today. So we celebrated between now and next Thursday, because there's a week-long celebration when we first opened. And we are very happy and proud to say the arts are supported by the county. So I'm going to take this opportunity to thank the county for always supporting the arts financially and otherwise. And we also are supported by many stakeholders in this town, many corporations, many the city government, and the state of Ohio. But our work speaks to a wide diversity of folks. So we speak to the LMI community, African American, Latinx, and we also speak to other audiences, because we know that our work is it crosses spectrums. The arts, of course, have a way of just giving us a feeling and a transformative, if arts are transformative, giving us a power that we don't have. If you think about the pandemic, we were isolated. We were in our homes, and there weren't a lot of things that we could do, but we could watch movies, we could listen to music, and we could create our own art. So we understand the power of the arts, and this is a great space to work in. The King Arts Complex have a lot of, we present a lot of free programs. So we're presenting and a performing arts organization, and we present programs that are free to the community, which is really important to this community and to the King Arts Complex. And in the course of a year, we have more than 25 free programs for the community, arts infused opportunities. And I'll just mention a couple of them that are very popular. One is MLK Day Open House. This year, we presented MLK Day Open House at the Ohio History Center. And both organizations had a record attendance, over 8,000 people. And everyone from federal district judges to OSU football players to the average man on the street was there. It was an incredible arts infused day. And our own president of Franklin County Commission was the keynote speaker. And thank you, President Crowley. And it was just a great day. I'll speak about two other programs. Our Hallmark program is our youth education program. It's an award-winning program. And much like Lisa said earlier, we run an after school and an out of school time program, summer camp, spring academy, winter academy. That program is changing lives every day. We know we're saving lives in many cases, and we have generations of kids coming to that camp. So we're always looking for support. We get about 180 kids a year, and it is a great opportunity for our kids to come in, and many parents rely on it. So I love our youth education program. We are teaching coding, Lisa, we'll talk about that. And we're teaching animation and filmmaking. So those are some of the non-traditional things that we've recently ventured into, because we know there's a great digital divide, and all of our kids want to create films. All of our kids want to create music. So we speak to them and meet them where they are. And the other big program I'll talk about is our summer concert series, which brings in tens of thousands. Most years it's about 30,000 people to the park. 6 weeks in the summer, open air music festival. And many people consider that a staycation. And 2 years ago, we had mayors from Toledo and Dayton coming in saying, how can we replicate this in our city? So we're pretty proud of that. I know the city of Columbus loves it, and we love hosting it. I will say this final thing about the King Arts Complex. Someone said to me, well, two final things. Someone said to me, the King Arts Complex is like our church. Now that's a seriously high compliment, but that's a high bar. And so we work every day to meet that. And I had a funder come through about 2 years ago, and he ghost shopped us. By saying that, I mean this. Before he came in, he asked someone standing at the bus stop, hey, what do you think about this place? And luckily, he said really great things, like my kids go there, my grandmother goes there to their first Tuesday tea, which is a senior programming that we have here this year, is incredibly popular. We love that place, and that's our spot. So we like that people in the community feel good about the King Arts Complex. We try to do everything we can every day to meet community need. And we're a source for the community, and we continue to work in that vein so that we are, here when people need us.
Thank you. That is so wonderful. And it is exceptionally clear that why and how your agencies are so important to our county residents, children. This is just such a great opportunity. So thank you so much for sharing this information. My next question I would love to ask you is, when you entered your professional field, what was the landscape like? And have you seen progress? And where do you see growth?
So I'll start because I actually have three entry points. I lawyer by trade. I worked in corporate for 22 years, and then in the arts. And I'll start with being a lawyer. So male-dominated profession. In the law profession today, less than 40% of all lawyers are women. And when it comes to African-American women, those numbers are lower. In 2010, it was 14.1% of all lawyers were African-American women. And in 2020, the number went up to 14.4%. So lots of opportunity for growth. I would say, if you look at the numbers in 10 years, decimal point increase for African-American women. And I think for women in general, it went up just a few points. So lots of opportunity for growth, certainly better than it used to be, but we still have a long ways to go. If I talk about corporate, really a lot of opportunity for growth in the corporate field. If you look at the C-suite, 8% of the people in the C-suite are women. And when you talk of African-American women, it's 1% to 2%. So numbers are dismal. If you look at Ohio, the World Organization reports that in Ohio, there are 266 C-suite positions, and less than 10 of them are held by African-American women. And the numbers for women in general are also small numbers. So we have improved, we have come some way, but a long way to go. I think the other thing about women in progress is pay equity. It's a huge issue, because even for the women who are in the C-suite, African-American or women in general, there's always a disparity when it comes to pay equity. And I was very proud to see Councilmember Barroso Diga pass the legislation with our colleagues at City Council last week, talking about pay equity and how the legislation, I think, essentially said you can't ask a woman what she made before she, when you're interviewing someone for a job, because what happens is we're not always sophisticated about salary negotiation, and we don't know what the opportunity is to make money. So if you ask someone who is making $35,000 a year, what were you making? And she says $35,000 a year, and you offer her 55. Oh, wow, that's huge. But what you might not know is in that pay band, it goes up to $105,000. And her male counterpart might be offered $75,000 or $80,000 for the same job, because, the implicit bias is a man and he needs to, feed his family, and all those things go into the equation. When I think about the arts, the opportunities are better. The arts tend to be more diverse, and the arts tend to consider diversity and we participate in the arts, whether it's LGBTQ, African American, Latino, women. We're all in the arts, and that so this is a better space. I would say that white women are doing better than African American women, and maybe African Americans in general. I was just on a call today with a lot of the local arts leaders, and there were a lot of white women on that call, but we are still in a minority. So better in the arts than in the law profession or in corporate America, but all have a ways to go.
Yeah, I would echo. So I'll talk about it from two perspectives. So one, just being a nonprofit leader, and then also from a technology perspective. And just 5% of CEOs or nonprofit organizations are Black. And when you think about the work that a lot of nonprofit organizations are doing in this community, and nationwide, that's a very low number. And then when you parse it down to just that Black and brown CEOs of nonprofit organizations receive less than 2% of philanthropic dollars. That's huge in terms of investments that are not being made in organizations led by Black and brown folks, and in organizations that are doing significant work in Black and brown communities. So lots of work there, Leandra, right? That's the short story on that. Unfortunately, the challenges that we have in the technology industry are just as great. That for a long time, we have known that Black and brown representation in the technology industry has been dismal. When I started in this space, and with TechCore, I was not coming at it as a computer scientist or an engineer. And I was very surprised early on about how little representation there was. And at the time, there were very few organizations that were even talking about it. TechCore was one of the first organizations to develop a program specifically for girls to deal with the fact that women are incredibly underrepresented in this space. And so I was proud that we were early on in doing that work. We've always been committed to making sure that we are casting wide nets and that we are having crucial conversations about the lack of representation. We're looking at the data that shows that we really start losing Black and brown kids as early as 4th grade, right? So our diversity initiatives cannot be, in the technology space, they really have to be broad. We have to look at the numbers across, and we have to also figure out why is it? Because it's not for lack of talent. I know it's not for lack of interest. When I think about the kids that we're working with and the things that we have seen them do and go on to achieve, but a lot of times it's just that they're not even being invited. They're not even being asked. They're not even being considered. And so for us organizationally, we want to make sure that we are casting that wide net, that we're bringing more kids that look like our community into this space. And what the research also shows us is that companies that are more diverse have a better bottom line, and when I think about this technology space and I think about right now, there is a very small group of folks that are developing a majority of the technology products that we use. What would happen if a more diverse group, a more representative group was actually in this space doing that creation? What things have we not experienced? What product has not been developed? What solution has not come to play because we don't have those diverse groups around the table thinking about that, right? So certainly, we want to have greater diversity, but I would say all of the research says that our bottom line would be stronger too if we did that. And if nothing else, let that be the reason that companies have a call to action to do a better job.
Absolutely, yes. And thank you so much to both of you for highlighting the statistics. Many of us hear it, especially among friends and groups in the different sectors, but to really hear it out loud and it's like, wow, those numbers are staggering. It definitely shows there is room for improvement, as you both stated, which definitely leads into my next question of, within your organizations, how you uplift women? Are there practices that are in place to ensure equity, within the field of technology and in the arts?
Yeah, so I'm just on my screen, I'm beside you, so that's why I start first, because it seems like that's the order I should go in. Yeah, I think that lots of things we do. You know, I will just say it takes courage to do it. You have to model the behavior. You have to activate the behavior too. You have to be willing to be accountable for what you do, what you're trying to do. You know, I think one of the first things is compensate people appropriately. Make sure that people who are women, Black women, brown women, BIPOC are being compensated appropriately. I think, you know, the Rooney Rule is really something we all should, apply. The NFL rule that's when you have a position, you have to make sure that there are people of color in the finalists. I think you have to do things that are intentional. When I was at Nationwide, there was a position open for a person who was losing her job, and she was going to lose her job. She was an African-American woman, and I put her in this position. And I remember my boss was like, well, I wouldn't have done it. And my response was, you probably would not have, but I think sometimes you have to go out and take it and stretch. You have to take a chance. And that woman, that was 20 years ago, is still at Nationwide doing incredibly well. So I think again, the word I come up with is courage. And you have to be an advocate. You have to be willing to pay people appropriately. And then I think you once you do it, you're accountable for it. You stand tall in it, you show up in the space, and you stay in the space. And I think the other thing that's important is sponsorship. We need to start sponsoring people so that they can have access and get opportunities. So in that case, I just mentioned I was not her mentor. I sponsored her because I knew what she could do, and it wasn't a big risk in my mind, although many people said to me I wouldn't have done it. But you have to be courageous enough to take that, again, model the behavior, and just show Lisa said something earlier. When we don't have the best minds on a problem, look at all the world problems we're going to be facing, whether it's environment, social justice, population, a space exploration, the whole digital world, works of art being created by IT. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but there are lots of intellectual property issues around that and lots of other issues around that. So how do we get the best minds creating these incredibly complicated worldwide problems that will be with us forever? Well, the only way you're going to get that is get all the people with all the different worldviews, all the different world experiences in the room trying to solve those problems. And so that's, why advocating for diversity around women and ethnicity and race and gender, why it really does matter. Because we are, like Aziza said, we are faced with all these problems, and that's the only way we're going to get them solved. So I think you model the behavior, you're courageous, you compensate people appropriately, and you stand accountable for what you do.
That's so well said. So I plus one everything that she just said. But I think, I think it is about being intentional in our actions, and also being courageous. And I loved, Demetrius, the thing you said about even sponsorship, right? I think those of us that are in positions that it is important that we are thinking about how it can't just be about I made it, right? It's got to be about how am I going to make sure that there's someone coming up behind me. And I was just with a group of nonprofit leaders in this technology space, all folks of color, and us talking about not just how we build a community to support each other in this space, but how we also build something that starts to look at where is that next group coming from, and really being intentional and unapologetic about it, right? When we look at these numbers, it says we haven't done a good job, and so we can't wait for someone else to take care of us or to make sure that these things, for those of us that are here, it's part of our responsibility, I feel.
I want to just reiterate that Lisa's right. We're duty bound. We're sitting in these positions. We're duty bound, and that's why. And go back to that example. It's like the person I was talking to was a white male, and there were even other Black people who said I wouldn't have done it. But you weren't in the seat. So at that point, I had the bully pulpit, and I made the decision, and it turned out well. And certainly there are gonna be times where they don't. But here's one of the issues that I have with that. Two issues I have. Sometimes people say, "Yeah, bring me an African American candidate, make sure they're qualified." I absolutely hate that phrase, because you're qualified in order to be considered. And I've never heard that phrase used with a white male. I've never heard that phrase used with them. And the other thing is mistakes. When we make a mistake, sometimes it follows us forever. Whereas other people make mistakes all the time. Had that been a mistake I made, would have been a mistake I made, and I would have kept moving. But other people make mistakes all the time. It seems like our mistakes, when we take chances like that, they follow us too much. But we cannot let that keep us from stepping out on faith and with courage and intentionality and making those calculated, educated decisions.
Thank you for saying that. Because I think that piece about being okay with making mistakes, that we do carry a lot, folks of color, and especially when you're in spaces where there aren't a lot of you, we feel like we can't make mistakes. And that's just not realistic. And it also prohibits us from pushing and taking chances and kind of, trying to step outside and try something new. And just last week, I was sharing with my director of operations. I was like, I'm saying this, but I'm saying it to myself. Like, I have to be okay that sometimes we're going to try stuff and it's not going to work, but that's how you get to that new solution or that new product is, and especially in this technology space, it's often about fail fast, but I haven't given myself that same grace. And I think that that's true for a lot of women, and specifically women of color. And we have to give ourselves that grace.
Yeah, I think this is one we can talk about forever. I will just say this, because Lisa, you're saying things that remind me what I wanted to say. What you just said reminded me of the difference. I think men bring something different to the table, and women bring something different to the table. But vulnerability is something that I think we're not afraid to show. And I think as a woman, that's a strength. And it is, I think you play to your strengths. And I think being willing to make mistakes and being vulnerable about that is okay. It just is.
Absolutely. And thank you for highlighting that. I think it just, like you said, across the board, we forget to give ourselves that grace. There's no perfectionism in marriage. Really allowing yourself for the mistake, because that's how you learn. That's where the growth lies. It's not from always being on point and being perfect, which we know is just not in existence. So thank you so much for highlighting that. With that in mind as well, do you have advice or guidance on how businesses can promote opportunities to appeal to women in tech and in the arts?
Yeah, I'll just go back to advice of how you promote it is, again, you walk it. So when I was at Nationwide early on in my career, we would go to HBCUs to interview kids because we were trying to provide diversity numbers. And to the person, the kids would say to me, and they were always kids from, your top-notch HBCUs like Spelman and Morehouse and, Howard and places like that. But they'd always look at me and say, well, how are you doing at Nationwide? And it was the right question. How have you been promoted? And so I think that's what people want to see is like, are you can talk about it all day long, but if the leadership is where it happens, it's where it matters. And the leadership is all, one homogeneous group of, let's say, white men, then you may talk about it, but if you're not showing it, it doesn't mean anything. So I think the first thing is that you have to be intentional about, promoting people, getting people sponsored, getting people in the position. And again, to Lisa's point earlier, if they fail, let's don't live that forever in terms of make a mistake rather. You keep it moving because we all do. But I think that's what they have to do. If you lead from the top and you have to show that by actually, giving people opportunities and access to be in position. And once they're in the position, we bring other people up. So I think that's what matters is it has to happen from the very top.
And I also would encourage folks to think about their strategies, right? It cannot be a one size fits all. So the way that you attracted one candidate might not work for the next one, right? And so again, in this technology space, that there's been some good research done about how you do attract more Black students into this space, or how you do attract more women. And it's not the same strategies that you use to attract a white male. And so I think and we think about this not just in terms of businesses, but even colleges and schools. What are the ways, if we walk into a school and they've got these computer science classes, but when they look at the makeup, it's filled with majority boys, or mostly white students, when it's a school that's predominantly Black and brown. And so, so that's when you have to dig in and say, well, how do you decide who gets into this course? What are you doing to market it? When I walk into this space, does it feel like a space that, as a woman of color, I would say I belong here, right? Or does it have posters of Star Trek, nothing wrong with Star Trek, or all gaming stuff up on the walls, so it's thinking, even because I think a lot of times folks will divert to, oh, well, those kids just must not be interested in this, or those people just don't want to work for this company. Instead of saying, one, have we changed the way that we invite folks in, right? And then have we also said, are we willing to also make some changes in our culture to make sure that not only do we hire diverse talent, but we can keep diverse talent? Because that's the other challenge in this space, is that you've got women coming into this technology space, spending about a year, and then they're out because they don't feel comfortable, because they don't feel seen, they don't feel supported. And so why stay, right? So, it kind of has to be, there are lots of things that we have to look at in terms of why we are not hitting our diversity numbers in the way that we should. The other thing that I would say that I was shocked about is how many folks really aren't counting and aren't tracking this information. And that's happening in schools, that's happening in nonprofit spaces, and that's happening in companies, and I don't know how you really can say you're committed to diversity if you're not actually counting your numbers, right? And tracking those numbers to see, are we really doing, are we making any difference? So for us organizationally, we've collected demographic data about the kids we've served for as far back as I've been doing this work. And we look at it every year. And then we pull it back and say, what is this telling us? What is this telling us about, where we need to go, what we might need to do different? Sometimes even drilling it down to saying, is there a particular program that we see attracts more girls than boys? Okay, let's look at, was that a program where, we had more female instructors, like what was it? What was happening? That's part of our process every year with our data. And so I'm proud about the numbers that we have, the representation that we have in our programs. It's not been an accident, and it is not because this organization just happens to be run by a woman of color.
Thank you so very much. Yes, that is excellent. And really just speaks to, as you spoke before, about intentionality. We need to be intentional about bringing in the pool of women candidates. But if I could ask, what do we do to ensure people understand why it's important to have women in these fields contributing to art and to tech?
Yeah, one of the things that Lisa said earlier, I think access, sometimes people say, well, we don't know where to find them. And what I want to say about that is access the network of folks who you're looking for. So if you want to find Black and brown people in technology, here's Lisa. She's available. She can tell you how to find them. You asked, why is it important? Again, how do we solve these complicated worldwide problems if we don't have people with various worldviews and various experiences? And the data, as Lisa pointed out earlier, the data is there. It's all kind of evidence-based outcomes that we can speak to. But why would you want, I wouldn't want everybody solving every problem who sounds and looks and acts just like me, because then I don't get any, I don't get any learning. There's nothing new there. So I think if people ask themselves that question, perhaps it's not a difficult, the answer would come to them more easily. But you want to have as many people as you can in the room, answering the questions, coming up with creative solutions, being more innovative. We cannot solve these problems with just one group of people, with one worldview and one experience. And the other side of that is your customer base. Your customers are going to want people who understand their problems to help solve the problems they have. If you were a makeup company, you would not want to just have white men or women creating makeup for people who look like me, because you have no idea what the need is. So I think the other thing that drives this is the product and the consumer of the product. The consumers are way more sophisticated than we used to be, and we're demanding equity and we're demanding things. If not, we vote with our feet and we go someplace where there's a product that has more, that reflects our values. So I think that those are two of the reasons that come to my mind.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And, and I would say too, I'll give you an example, voice activated technology. Some of the first iterations of that did not recognize women's voices. Why? Because it was developed by an all male group, right? So who didn't, and you don't know what you don't know. So they didn't even think, oh, there might be a difference in male and female voices, and maybe we should, I met this sister a couple of years ago who was an engineer for a car company. And she, in her internship, was working for this car company that was doing some voice activated, commands in the car. She was from the South. She had a really strong accent, and this technology could not understand her, and so she was able to bring that up to her team, and they were able to solve for that in the software early on, instead of releasing a product that would not work for a large segment of the population, right? So I think it's, again, those things that there are very clear examples of when companies don't have diverse teams and release products that do not work, or release a product in a way that is offensive, not the intention, but because you didn't have a diverse group around the table saying, oh, that's the way you're going to roll that. Well, we might want to consider this. There's just so much research and information about why we need diverse teams. It's just ridiculous that we're not there yet.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much. Those are excellent points. It makes me think of something as well. Thinking back when I was a child, wanting to get, I wanted to be a lawyer at one point. So it was, okay, who are my role models in this field? Are there any women specifically within your field that guided you and helped to inspire you to get to this point?
I have 4, and I'll try to be as quick as I can, but this is important to me. This may be my favorite question. So when I think about women, and it's not really so much my field, it's just in general, accomplishment, achievement, education, persistent pursuing being a lifelong learner. I think about people like, I can go as far back as Mother Teresa. She taught us about humility and humanity and service. And service is something I'm committed to doing in all my life. And she taught us about sacrifice. And so I always think about her and what she did to serve the greater good. And serving the greater good is what this is, the space that I live in today. And then I think about Shirley Chisholm. the first African-American woman elected to Congress. She was out of Brooklyn, New York, I was born in Brooklyn, and I've been around her just a few times, not that I knew her, but she was not that big of a person, but she was a force to deal with. She was a force of nature. And she was the first African-American to, sort of put her name in to become president. So make a bid for presidency of the United States. And so I think about Shirley Chisholm, I think about Mother Teresa, and then I think about Joyce Beatty, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, again, a force of nature, a transformative leader, someone who I remember she went to Nelson Mandela's funeral. She's one of the part of the congressional delegation that went to that funeral. And she got off Air Force One and came to Columbus. And I was actually at a service place where she was that day. And I said, "You just came from South Africa, Nelson Mandela's funeral, you're here." She's like, "Well, I said I would be here, so I am." An accountable leader and a person who just has done, she may be, in Columbus protesting the killing of George Floyd, and then on the floor of the US Congress passing legislation to regulate banks. So I think about a person like that who's a force transformative leader. But the person I think about the most is my great-grandmother, who was, two quick stories about her. She stood about 5 feet, maybe 5'2", but she never knew she was short. She showed herself tall all the time. She broke her hip at 77. She was 77 in the 60s and broke her hip. And they said, "You don't have any bone marrow and you'll never walk again." Well, that just wasn't her. So she said a choice word to them, and I won't repeat it, but she knew she would walk again. And so she was in a wheelchair and then in a walker, and then she walked with a cane for the rest of her 15 or 20 years that she lived. She lived a long time, and she walked with a cane in one hand, and she was known to have a bag of groceries under the other arm, and she might walk 5 or 6 blocks to the grocery store, or maybe a basket of clothing under one arm while she was going to the laundry with a cane in the other hand. So she was fierce. The last thing I would say about her is that we had, as I said earlier, had family in New York, so she traveled back and forth to New York on, back then, what was known as the Trolley's bus. And her children, they never sat in the back of the bus. So she was Rosa Parks 20 or 30 years earlier. And my grandfather tells a story when she went to buy the tickets, it's like they just knew. She said, "We don't sit on the back of the bus, and we're not going to." And they didn't. And they rode interstate all the way to New York from South Carolina on the front of the bus. And no one ever bothered her. And my grandfather said when other people, Black people, get on the bus, they look, sort of bewildered. But she never moved. She stood tall, and she was don't say no, fierce. And she also took care of a lot of people. So the service comes to me naturally. She was one to know, if you want to go north to get a better job, leave your kids here with me. I'll keep them. When you're ready to come back, come get them. So those are the 4 women that have impacted my life, and that just taught me about service and humility and humanity and perseverance. And you just don't take no for an answer.
Nice. I have been so blessed to have a number of incredible women in my life who have modeled for me both how to just be the person that I want to be, and then also how to be the leader that I want to be. And I've had early on 2 incredible mentors around my work that looked at me and supported me as a whole person. So not just in my professional role, but as a whole person, which has been incredibly helpful throughout my career, to just be able to turn to them and have, conversations. And I remember early on, one of my mentors said, when I took over the national organization, she said, "Congratulations, but it's also going to be very lonely work." And I don't think that that's something that's said to a lot of nonprofit leaders, but it can be, right? And that's okay. That's part of it, but it was nice to have someone acknowledge that and let me know early on that, so I knew it wasn't personal, right? And then, you know, I too have just had incredible women in my family, in my life, from my grandmothers to my mother, who have been women that just, again, have continued to model to me how important it is to be the full expression of who God created me to be, and to not apologize for that. And I'm extremely blessed and grateful for that. And I would just say too, I think that there are women, just like there are people that come and go in our lives, and there's always something to gain and something to learn. So just being aware of that, and you know, it's like just being aware of life, all that is happening in and around you. So yeah, thank you for that question.
Yes, thank you so much. Amazing to have these people to look forward to and to inspire us, to keep us going. Even in that vein, it makes me think of individuals that enter a field, and then sometimes there are barriers to completion of that, especially when we're entering the field of tech, the law, the arts. Do you have supports in place for those individuals that have barriers? And thinking in celebration of Women's History Month, we have childcare provider barriers, transportation barriers. Do you have supports in place to assist those? And any advice for someone that might be in a place where I'm entered and I want to finish it through, but sometimes
I think about this. So performance can be your equalizer, but sometimes it's not enough. And the reason I say that is because there's social, political, relationship stuff that can get in the way. And you can have the best numbers in the world. You can have the best performance and track record in the world. But I think we need to begin to talk to people about those three things. I actually got that from Donna James, social, political, relationship. But are you operating with the right social network? Are you talking to the right people? Are you having conversations around how you navigate things from a social perspective? And then relationships, what relationships are you building? Do you have your own personal sort of board of directors? Do you have go-to people that can stand in the gap for you in case you need them for something? And and it's a two-way street now. Are you supportive of them? And, you know, as Les Wright said to me one time, support people who support you. And do you have the right political, are you politically savvy? And if you don't have those things, those can all be learned. And so develop those areas, because sometimes performance alone is not enough.
Yeah, and I think network, you know, that network that you're speaking about, unless you grew up in a family that taught you that, there's really not a space for you to learn it. So those of us, again, that have, it's important for us to start, you know, sharing that information with our circles. And, you know, I think we ran a program a number of years ago in Franklin County with high school students, and it actually was supported by the county. And one of the things that I don't teach, I'm not the technology person on the team at all, so just know that. But I was with the kids this particular day, and we started having a conversation about networks, which there are certainly networks in technology, but I went beyond with them and talked about the importance of starting to build those networks, you know, and that from early on, and you continue to nurture them, and it has to be a give and a take type relationship. But those are the things that will get you to where you want to go. You don't have to be the only person that can get you there. But if you can connect, if you can link and leverage, if you can help somebody out along the way, you can get to where you want to go. You know, you don't have to hold everything. And we need to also know that that's part of how it should happen, right? Because that's how it happens for other folks, you know, and in other communities. And we need to know that that's okay for us to do and support each other in that way. And it's extremely important for us to do. So yeah.
I just want to reiterate that. I think it is extremely important for us to do. I just want to say that twice, because if we are not doing that, I think we're letting the ancestors down, because we have been taught, we think about, people love to talk about, when I was younger, at least my generation talks about this, when I was younger, you would be chastised by other people in the community. That's how we were raised, that the whole community helps out, that the whole community has your back, that the entire community is cheering for you. And if we're not doing that, then we're not doing the way we were raised, to handle things. So it is important to continue to network with each other. When we finish this call, Lisa and I will be having coffee at some point in time, just because we met on this call, and I think it's important to keep the relationship going. So do we have each other's back? And if we do, as women, as people of color, we don't always have the golf course, okay? So we have to find our own golf course.
Absolutely, and I love that. That was great. If I could, our final question that I would have, what are historical moments for women in art, women in tech, that have occurred at your organizations, things that we really want the public to know about and put it out there? I think that'd be great to highlight if you have them to share.
So my favorite thing in terms of a woman of color and historical moment at the King Arts Complex is our annual Amina Robinson Day. So Amina Robinson died in 2015. She was 75 at the time, but it seemed awfully young to us. It still seems young to me, and I will miss her forever. But when she died, we pledged to keep her memory alive forever. I mean, this is the MacArthur Fellow, brilliant, exquisite artist is known around the world. How dare us not keep her memory alive? So we host an annual day around Amina, and we hosted in, Amina, I think would be proud, because we hosted around what's important to her. Community artists, always have community artists here. We use found objects to work with during that day. She loved artists having a place to do art, and she said you have to have a place to do art. So we present a place for them to do art. And of course, we have a lot of her work. If you've not been to the King Arts Complex before, her work is throughout the building, beautiful pieces of her work. And what I love most about Amina, besides the exquisite art, is her storytelling. She was a scholar, and in her work, you see stories of what the work is depicting, and it's always well-researched. I mean, she was very much a scholar. Her scholarship was extraordinary. And so you learn, it's historical. It's going to be a historical piece if you look at her work. And so we love celebrating her, and it's every weekend on her birthday. If her birthday falls on a Saturday, it's that day, but it's February 17th around that time every year. And so that's the most significant, historical event around a woman that we celebrate here. But we have all kind of women artists, a lot of women artists, I should say, in the building, and celebrate a lot of them. But Amina Robinson is our beloved, treasure that we celebrate here on her birthday and other days as well.
Here. Well, TechCourse had lots of historical moments over the years. I think for us, one that we really are excited about is, and you mentioned this when you kind of introduced me, I started out as the state director for the Ohio chapter. And, for a number of years, we were going along and we were doing good work here in Ohio. And we started innovating. We started developing new programs. We just, really started pushing. Again, I mentioned we developed one of the first all-girl programs, technology programs. And when our founder came to our Ohio group in 2011 and said, I've been watching what you're doing, and I really want, you all to take over the Ohio or the national charter, that was a big deal for us. And it wasn't something that we entered into lightly. my board spent almost a year really thinking about that, and if we did that, what that would mean. And the way that our charter was set up, we couldn't do business, we couldn't do work outside of the state of Ohio. And so by taking over the charter, we would be able to do that. And, you know, I had such a great group to go through that process with. And, you know, here standing, you know, 10 years, 11 years after the fact, you know, that we're now delivering programs in 10 different states. So for us, it was the fact that we were developing what we knew was some really great work and work that could be really transformational for the kids that we interacted with. And so to have the opportunity now to do that work, not just in the state of Ohio, but in these other states as well, and continue to grow, I think that time was really important and exciting for us. And so that would be the one time I would name.
Congratulations.
Absolutely wonderful. Yes. Exactly. Thank you both so much. This has been such an enlightening and amazing event, very uplifting. And thank you so much for the work you do to support not just women, but our community, Franklin County in general. Thank you so much for those that have tuned in. We have wonderful information we will provide. We will have the website information for both of your organizations, ensure that's posted so that those interested in the programs can look and absolutely participate. I look forward to participating in them personally myself. So again, thank you. And we look forward to celebrating women far beyond Women's History Month. It should be every single day. So thank you again all. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.